The marble floor shimmered under the golden light, each polished tile reflecting a world Rachel Monroe had never belonged to. Her boots, worn and dust-caked from the Texas roads, made a quiet thud as she stepped into the Whitaker Motors corporate showroom. The air smelled of money, cool leather, imported cologne, and silent judgment. Around her, suits moved like sharks, crisp smiles hiding sharper thoughts. Behind the concierge desk, a blonde woman in a navy pencil skirt looked up, her expression shifting the moment she took in Rachel's oil-stained jeans and denim jacket. "Ma'am," she said slowly, "the service entrance is at the back." Rachel didn't flinch. She had come here to deliver the keys to the CEO's custom vintage Shelby Mustang, a car she had stayed up all night restoring after it broke down during one of his country drives. She held the key out, polite but firm. "I'm not here for an application. I'm here for Brandon Whitaker." The receptionist blinked, then gave a brittle smile. "I'm sure Mr. Whitaker doesn't take walk-ins from roadside mechanics. Especially not ones without an appointment." Rachel didn't move. But inside, a quiet memory stirred. The sound of summer wind, the smell of peaches, and a boy's voice once promising, "I'll come back for you." A man in a pressed black suit walked by, slowed down, gave her a glance, and muttered under his breath, "These people never know where they don't belong." Rachel felt the burn, sharp and familiar. Still, she didn't react. She had a job to finish. She stepped closer to the desk. "I was told to bring this personally." His request. She placed the key down, gently, as if it meant more than metal. The receptionist's smile vanished. "Security." Two guards approached, tall and well-fed, their steps loud on the marble. One reached for her elbow. "We'll escort you out, ma'am." Rachel looked at the hand before it touched her. Her voice remained calm. "You can tell Brandon his Mustang's fixed. No charge." She turned, walking past polished glass and stifled laughter, past men who didn't remember a girl on a porch swing 20 years ago. But just before the doors closed behind her, Brandon Whitaker stepped out of the elevator, phone to his ear, voice clipped with irritation. "I don't care if it costs 10 grand. I said I wanted it running by tonight." His eyes caught the key on the desk. Then the flash of a name, Monroe Garage. And in a split second, everything froze. Because he'd carved that name into a tree once. Right below hers. He looked up, but she was already disappearing into the heat. But they didn't know, she wasn't just some mechanic. She was the girl he never kept his promise to. And on her finger, hidden beneath years of calluses and grit, was a ring he once gave with trembling hands and a whisper, "When I come back, you'll still be mine." The doors closed. And the world tilted. The sun beat down hard on the cracked pavement outside Monroe Garage. Dust swirled with each gust of wind, catching in the curls of Rachel's hair as she stood with her back to the road, eyes fixed on the tool tray she couldn't focus on. Her hands moved from wrench to bolt by instinct, but her mind was somewhere else. 20 years back, in a peach orchard that no longer existed, beneath a sky so wide it had once felt like freedom. The clang of metal snapped her back. Uncle Luther stood in the doorway, lean and silent, wiping his hands with a rag that had seen better years. "You good?" he asked, but he already knew the answer. Rachel nodded anyway. "He didn't recognize me." "You sure?" "No," her voice cracked quietly. "But if he did, he didn't stop me." She didn't tell Luther about the way his eyes had widened at the sight of her name. Or the split second of hesitation in the marble lobby before the elevator doors swallowed him whole. That kind of pain didn't need to be shared. It had already been carved into her. Inside the garage, the smell of oil and engine grease was comforting, almost holy. It was the only place she didn't have to explain herself. Machines didn't care who left you behind. She moved to the back, pulled out a drawer, and found it, an old wooden box with corners worn from too many nights held too tightly. Inside, folded beneath a faded photo, lay a simple gold ring. A child's promise made under the stars. Rachel stared at it for a long time. Not because she needed the memory, but because she needed to remember how far she'd come without it. Her mother's voice came to her, low and soft like summer rain. You don't need to wear his ring to be strong, baby girl. But you wear it if it reminds you who you are. She slipped it on again, where it belonged. Not as a memory. As armor. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, a letter came in the mail with the Whittaker crest embossed in gold. No message. Just a check, folded neatly beside an invoice she never sent. She stared at the number. Enough to replace every tool in the garage. Enough to move to Dallas. Start over. But Rachel tore it in half, slow and deliberate. Money wasn't what she came for. She looked up at the mirror above the workbench. The reflection staring back wasn't the girl he left behind. It was the woman he would have to face. Because somewhere inside the Whittaker empire, under all that marble and polished glass, still lived a boy who broke a promise he didn't know he'd regret for the rest of his life. And now, without knowing it, he'd come back into the life of the woman who had never stopped fixing what men like him kept breaking. Shadows stretched across the garage. Rachel turned off the lights. But the fire inside her had just started to burn. The next morning came with a kind of silence that felt rehearsed, like the whole town had agreed not to speak too loudly about what had happened the day before. Aurora City had always been that way. Dusty secrets buried under friendly hellos and eyes that watched without blinking. Rachel pulled the bay doors open just as the sun broke over the horizon. Her hands moved like clockwork, wiping tools, checking inventory, oiling the chain hoist that always groaned at just the wrong time. Routine was safe. Predictable. But even before she turned around, she felt it. That tightening in the air. A pair of polished loafers stepped across the threshold. Too clean for this place. Too careful. She didn't look up. We don't open until 8. A pause. Then a voice, smooth and slow. I'm not here for repairs. She turned. A man in a navy suit stood there, early 40s, salt at the edges of his hair. Not Brandon. But cut from the same cloth. The Whittaker logo on his lapel confirmed it. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Whittaker, he said. He'd like to thank you personally. There's a gala this Friday at the Whittaker Foundation. He's requested your presence. Rachel let out a low breath. Tell Mr. Whittaker I don't do tuxedos and shrimp cocktails. The man didn't flinch. Just reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. No check this time. Just a card. She took it, reluctantly. It wasn't the invite that made her heart skip. It was the handwriting. Clean cursive, slanted slightly left. She hadn't seen it in 2 decades, but she hadn't forgotten it. Brandon's hand. The man left without another word. Rachel closed the garage door halfway, let the sunlight slant in at an angle that hit the photo above the bench just right. 2 kids, laughing, sitting on an old Chevy hood. His arm draped over her shoulder like he already knew how much it would hurt to let go. Later that afternoon, Luther came in, dust on his boots and a quiet in his eyes that meant he'd heard something. They sent a man in a suit, she told him. He didn't ask who. He just looked at the ring on her finger, then back at her. You think he remembers? Rachel swallowed. He remembers the name. But not the weight. That night, while Aurora slept under broken streetlights and brittle stars, Rachel sat on the back porch, her mother's shawl around her shoulders. The breeze carried the smell of mesquite and worn-out memories. She held the invitation under the moonlight, fingers tracing the letters again and again. There was no RSVP number. Just 3 words scribbled at the bottom, nearly invisible in the ink. Did I break you? The question wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Rachel folded the card, tucked it behind the photo. Across town, in a house lined with marble columns and thick drapes that blocked out truth, Brandon Whitaker sat alone in a room full of paintings he didn't like. A tumbler of whiskey untouched. His eyes scanning the invite template again, but it wasn't the words that haunted him. It was the mechanic's eyes. And the ring. He didn't know her. He couldn't have. But something about the way she stood, shoulders set against the world, jaw clenched like she'd survived fire, made something old in him ache. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a velvet box. Inside, a matching ring. Smaller. A child's size. Still polished. Still waiting. And somewhere, behind his composed breath and iron shirt, a memory clawed at the surface. A field. A promise. A name he used to whisper in the dark. But it was too long ago. Too far. Wasn't it? Friday night fell like velvet over Aurora City, warm and heavy. The Whitaker Foundation Gala was a symphony of crystal glasses, designer heels, and words that weighed nothing but carried everything. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and somewhere between the silk curtains and polished marble, Rachel Monroe walked in wearing a black dress older than the room itself. Her boots made soft taps on the floor, out of place in a sea of stiletto clicks. She didn't wear makeup. Didn't wear a smile. But she wore the ring. Heads turned. Not because they recognized her, but because they couldn't place her. And that always made people nervous. She moved through the crowd like someone walking through a museum where nothing belonged to her. The air buzzed with whispers. Women glanced. Men stared. Brandon stood by the fountain in the center of the room, half listening to a senator drone about tax codes. His jaw tightened. The sound fell away when he saw her. He didn't move at first. Didn't speak. Just stared like a man watching a dream take form, except it was sharper, heavier, and more real than any dream had the right to be. Rachel stopped a few feet away. Her voice was calm, low. You asked if you broke me. Brandon blinked. She reached into her bag. Pulled out the photo. 2 kids on the Chevy hood. Laughter frozen in time. His eyes widened, color draining from his face. Rachel placed the photo in his hand. Your father said I was a phase. Said your bloodline couldn't afford a girl like that. Brandon's mouth opened, but no words came. She touched the ring. You gave this to me in a field outside Houston. You were 16. You said you'd come back. He stepped back, breath shallow. Rachel. I thought you left. They told me you moved away. They. Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed straight. You mean your family, who made sure I disappeared while you were in prep school? The room shifted. A few heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sip. Rachel pulled out a letter, creased, stained, but still readable. She held it up, not high, just enough. You wrote me. Once. I kept it. Your father kept the others. He made sure we were erased. Brandon reached for the letter like it might dissolve in air. I never stopped looking. I swear. When I took over the company, I asked. No one told me. They didn't have to, she said. Because I already knew. I knew when the eviction notice showed up. I knew when my mother vanished. I knew when I had to build my life from ashes you never saw. Behind her, Luther stepped forward from the shadow of the curtains. His eyes locked on Brandon. You want to talk bloodlines, he said quietly. She's got more steel in her spine than anyone in this room. Brandon looked between them. I didn't know. God, Rachel, I didn't know. Her eyes glistened but didn't break. And now you do. Silence pressed down like humidity. Then a voice from the side, a woman in a green gown, whispering to another, isn't that the Whitaker family ring? But, it's hers. The room inhaled. Rachel turned to leave. But Brandon's hand caught her wrist, not tight, not forceful. Just enough. "I saw the ring," he said. "That's why I stopped the car. That's why I sent the man. Not because you fixed something. Because you wore the thing I thought I buried with a version of me I barely remember." Her eyes met his. For a second, everything paused. "I didn't keep it for you," she whispered. "I kept it to remind myself I once believed in something. That a boy who kissed grease from my cheek and promised forever hadn't been a lie." The gala watched like statues, unsure if they were witnessing a scandal or something sacred. Then Rachel walked away. And this time, Brandon followed. The hallway outside the gala was cooler, quieter, like the building itself knew too much had just happened. Rachel leaned against the wall, eyes closed, hands still trembling from the confrontation. The echo of her words hadn't even faded before Brandon stepped out after her. But he didn't speak. For once, he didn't try to fix anything. He just stood there, the silence between them full of things that had been buried too long, memories with the edges worn out, questions without answers, and guilt so thick it choked the air. Rachel finally opened her eyes. She didn't look at him. "You think saying sorry would matter now?" she asked. He took a breath, unsure how to hold the weight of what he'd just broken open. "No. I think it's too late for that. But it doesn't mean I shouldn't say it." She exhaled, tired in a way no sleep could fix. "You know what it's like. Growing up knowing someone promised you forever, then vanished like you never existed?" He didn't respond. "I was 16. You were the only thing that felt real. And then one morning, everything was gone. My mom, my house, my life. All erased like I was some mistake you outgrew." Brandon looked down. "He told me you moved on. That you found someone else." "I was just a boy, Rachel. And he was a man who knew how to make people disappear." Rachel finally turned to him. "And what are you now? Still just a boy hiding behind his name?" Her words didn't spit fire. They didn't need to. They landed like truth. Heavy. Unavoidable. Brandon nodded slowly. "I've built towers with my last name. Signed deals that made people kings. But when I saw you, covered in oil and sunlight, I felt more like a man than I ever have in boardrooms." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then came the voice from behind, Luther again, stepping into the quiet with his signature stillness. His eyes weren't kind, but they weren't cruel either. "You know what she did after everything?" he said to Brandon. "She built something from nothing. Raised a kid. Worked that garage when others laughed at her. Never once played the victim." Brandon's brow furrowed. "A kid?" Luther raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. Rachel's face didn't twitch. Her silence was louder than any confession. "I thought, you weren't," Brandon's voice trailed, tangled in uncertainty. Rachel turned back toward the ballroom doors. "It's not your story anymore." Brandon stepped closer, lower now, not in posture, but presence. "Then let me earn a place in it again. However long it takes." Her back stayed turned. Her voice was steady. "Some wounds don't want apologies. They want space to breathe. To scar. To remind you." He nodded, even as the pain crept into his jaw. "Then I'll wait. Even if all I get is the reminder." Behind them, the ballroom buzzed with half-truths and full assumptions. A waiter hurried past, whispering, "That's the girl with the ring." Someone else followed with a phone half-raised, recording shadows and headlines. Rachel walked past them all like they were ghosts, no longer capable of hurting her. She stepped outside into the night. Brandon didn't chase her this time. He stood in the doorway, watching her blend into the haze of streetlight and silence, the same way she had vanished from his life once before, but this time, he knew exactly what he'd lost. And it wasn't just a woman. It was the version of himself that only ever existed when she was near. Morning light spilled across the cracked concrete outside Monroe Garage, casting long golden lines between oil stains and forgotten screws. The sun hadn't fully risen, but Rachel was already there, hands buried in a rusty engine bay, as if she could wrench clarity from metal and time. The garage smelled like motor oil and old hope. For years, it had been her sanctuary, her shield. A place where no one asked about the ring she wore or the silence she carried. But today, the silence broke. The bell above the door jingled. She didn't look up. "I told you not to come here," she said, calm but firm. "It's not him," a soft voice replied. She turned. Amelia stood there. Rachel froze. "You." Amelia's smile trembled. Her silver hair was tied back like it used to be, and in her hand was a small tin box with flowers painted on the lid, the same one Rachel had hidden in when the world collapsed. "I never died," Amelia whispered. "He just made sure you thought I did." Rachel's knees nearly buckled. Amelia crossed the floor slowly. "Your uncle knew. He promised to protect you until it was safe." "You let me think I was alone," Rachel said, voice cracking. "You watched me suffer." "Why?" "Because if I'd come back too soon, they'd come for you again. I saw what Brandon's father was capable of. I had to disappear, so you could survive." The weight of years collapsed between them. Rachel didn't cry, not loudly. But her shoulders shook, and her hands, the ones that fixed everything but herself, finally let go. Amelia wrapped her in her arms. "I kept everything," she whispered. "Your letters. The sketches. The picture of you with that ring." Rachel pulled back slightly. "You knew what it meant. I was there when he gave it to you. You thought I was asleep on the porch swing. But I saw. And I prayed he'd be the one." Rachel laughed softly, bittersweet. "He was a boy. I was a girl. And we never got to become anything else." Later that afternoon, as Rachel sat on the porch steps, coffee in hand, Luther walked out and joined her. He didn't say much. Just nodded toward the street. Brandon's car sat parked under the elm tree, same place it had broken down a week ago. But he didn't step out. He just waited. Rachel sighed. "He's stubborn." Luther smirked. "So are you." "He says he wants to earn a place in my story," she said. "But what if I'm done writing about the past?" "Then start a new chapter," Luther said. "But don't burn the old one before you read it through." A few minutes later, Amelia stepped outside, holding a small envelope. "This came this morning," she said. "From the Whitaker estate." Rachel opened it carefully. Inside was a deed. To Monroe Garage, the letter read. "All debts cleared. The land is yours. Forever." No signature. Just a pressed flower, white magnolia. The same one from her childhood sketchbook. She didn't smile. But she didn't cry either. Instead, she walked to the edge of the porch, looked out at the street where the past and the future waited quietly together. And she whispered, "Maybe I'll let him wait." Behind her, Amelia laid a hand on her shoulder. "You already waited long enough." The storm had passed, but the air still carried that clean, charged scent, like the world had been scrubbed raw and honest. Rachel stood by the back of the garage, where the dust faded into wild grass and forgotten roads. In her hand was the old tin box her mother had returned to her, its faded paint still chipped in the corner where she'd once clutched it too tightly, too afraid. She hadn't opened it in years. The latch creaked. Inside were folded papers, childhood sketches, yellowed photographs, and one thing she'd nearly forgotten, a letter. The handwriting was shaky, boyish. But she remembered it. Every stroke. Every pause. A promise written in pencil from a 13-year-old boy to a girl with grease on her hands and dreams in her eyes. "When I grow up," It read, "I'll find you. I'll be rich and strong. And I'll fix the world so it doesn't break you again. Keep this ring until then." Rachel blinked slowly. The ring was still on her finger, dulled by years but unbroken. Behind her, footsteps approached. "I didn't know," Brandon said, quietly. "Until I saw the ring. And it all came back." She didn't turn. "Not yet. I didn't think you were real," he continued. "My father told me I made you up. That I imagined the girl in the garage, the promise, the sketchbook. He said it was just a phase. I believed him. I buried you." Rachel finally turned. Her eyes weren't angry. Just tired. "You didn't bury me," she said. "You just forgot I kept waiting." He stepped closer. In his hand was a photo, faded, torn at the edge. A little boy and girl standing under the rusted Aurora sign. She remembered it. Her mother had taken it, moments before she disappeared. "I want to rebuild what my father destroyed," Brandon said. "And not just companies or trust funds. I mean places like this. People like you." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and took the photo. Folded it gently. Then looked at him, not as a girl left behind, but as the woman who had stayed and survived. "You don't get to fix me," she said. "But maybe you can build something, next to me." Brandon nodded. "Not a promise. Just a beginning." Weeks later, at the edge of the city where no one bothered to look, a new sign hung outside the garage. Monroe and Whitaker Restoration Company. Beneath it, in smaller script, someone had carved a quiet line. "Once broken, never wasted." Inside, the hum of machines blended with soft laughter. Amelia taught local teens how to weld. Luther carved wood by hand near the back. Rachel, sleeves rolled and fire in her eyes, stood next to a 12-year-old girl holding a wrench upside down. "That's backward," Rachel said. The girl pouted. "You sure?" Rachel smiled. "I've been sure of a lot of things. This one's easy." Then the bell rang. Another stranger. Another car. Another story beginning. But this time, the girl with the ring wasn't the one waiting. She was the one answering the door.